Hello NASH, I'm Pavle Djokic.
And I'm Nick Giorgetti.
Today we are honored to welcome Congressman Keith Rothfus to NASH. Welcome,
Hello.
Congressman.
Good to be here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, in your opinion, Mr. Rothfus, what are the most important issues facing our country today?
Gosh, we have a number of important issues. One of the things that we've seen over the last 10 years from an economic perspective is historically low growth rates, and that has translated into fewer job opportunities for folks, stagnant wages, and we look at the increasing debt in the country.
Yeah.
I understand that we need to have a healthy, growing, thriving, dynamic economy to really address a lot of the issues we have, whether it's making sure we have enough jobs, making sure people's wages are going up, making sure we're getting revenues coming into the federal treasury to pay for critical programs, whether it's Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits, national defense, you name it. We have to have a healthy, growing, thriving economy that's growing at a much healthier pace than we have over the last 10 years. You look at recessions that have happened since World War II, the coming out of the 2008 recession, we have had the slowest economic growth rate since that time. It's about 1.9%. Historically, we grow at 3.5%. And the difference between that is significant in terms of people's job opportunities, wages, and revenues coming into the government. So getting this economy growing again, which we have over the last year seen economic growth rates start to pick up through the regulatory reform initiatives we've been championing in Congress, and most recently the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Okay. So you were in support of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act?
Yes.
Okay. And that's because right now, as we understand, the economy is doing pretty well, but by the time we enter the workforce, after we finish college and start to get jobs, that may not be the same. So what steps do you think are necessary for the future, for our generation, maybe the next generation, to set us up for success?
Well, one of the issues we've had, in what's so important about the tax cut bill, is that you look at the United States comparison to the rest of the world. This is a global economy.
Yeah.
But you looked at the tax rates that we had in this country compared to other countries. We had higher business taxes on American businesses than China had on Chinese businesses, or Mexico had on Mexican businesses. And in a global economy, we talk a lot about a comparative advantage that a country would have. Look, I think it's an advantage for us if we have lower tax rates for American businesses, because that means they're going to want to invest in this country, which means more jobs and higher wages. Definitely. So as we see this process play out over the next few years, where more capital is going to be coming into this country, and we've seen this as a direct result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a company like Apple deciding to bring home tens of billions of dollars, potentially creating tens of thousands of jobs in this country, and that's just one company. And so again, we can continue to see American businesses deciding to invest in their businesses here, in their people here. Locally, we've seen PNC Bank, for example, give bonuses to its people, investing in their business right here. So we have to continue that trend so that when you're in college and looking at opportunities, one thing about your generation is that you really have never seen what a healthy economy can do. You know, we saw a healthy economy really pick up in the late 1980s, really pick up throughout the 1990s, but really since 2000, 2001, it's been relatively stagnant. And so you have to get your arms around what 3 to 4% economic growth can be. And you can have sustained periods of that. For example, in the 1980s, we grew from between 1982 and 1990, we grew at a very healthy pace. In the 1990s, between 1994 and 2000, we grew at a very healthy pace. So that's what we need to be doing, both from a tax perspective and a regulatory perspective, because as damaging as high taxes are, overwhelming red tape from Washington, D.C. has been very detrimental. I'm on the Financial Services Committee. I have oversight for the banks, the securities markets, insurance companies, Federal Reserve, the International Monetary Fund, anything dealing with the financial industry. We have seen the overregulation in that industry, which has directly, one economist talked about there being 650,000 fewer small businesses over the last 10 years because of this overregulation. That's 6.5 million jobs. So as we look for right regulation, regulation is important. It's good because it's going to guard against fraud. It's going to make sure that banks are sustainable. But we have seen this overwhelming trickle-down regulation that was meant for Wall Street really hit local community banks and credit unions. And so we've seen even in Western Pennsylvania consolidation where smaller banks are merging with another, and that's not good for the consumer either.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about this like kind of global economy and this like national issues, but here in like our district, what do you think are the biggest issues that impact us on a day-to-day basis?
It's always going to be jobs in the economy.
Jobs, okay.
People need to make sure that they can take care of their family, that they have a family-sustaining job. One of the initiatives I'm working on right now, we have a threat to some power plants over in Beaver County.
Yeah.
They've talked about the company has gone into bankruptcy. There's a very important issue here dealing with what I call fuel secure or base load electricity. People take for granted that when you go to the light switch, lights come on. We had a very harsh cold snap this past December and January. If it weren't for the fuel secure plants that we have out there, whether they're nuclear or coal, the system would have collapsed. This was a study that the National Energy Technology Laboratory, we have an office right here in the South Hills for NETL, did an analysis. We saw the same thing happen about 4 years ago with the polar vortex. We came very close to the lights going off. So we want to make sure from a national energy policy, we want to have a diverse mixture of energy in our portfolio.
Yeah.
And so I've been leading the effort, trying to get the administration to recognize the importance of having a grid that is sustainable and resilient and that can respond to situations like that.
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to ask you something odd but fun. What is your favorite type of lunch meat?
Favorite type of lunch? I guess it's going to be turkey.
Turkey, yeah.
Yeah, just basic. And whenever I go to Bruegger's or any sandwich shop, it's going to be a turkey sandwich.
Okay.
Fair. Okay. Let's get back on track to some more serious stuff. What do you think is your biggest professional accomplishment thus far as a congressman?
Gosh, you look at the initiatives I've been leading on. One of the things that early on when I came in, there was an issue with our locks and dams over on the Ohio River. We know, for example, that within 10 years there's a 50% chance that one of those is going to fail. And if we had a failure of one of those locks and dams, that would be really catastrophic for our Western Pennsylvania economy. There's a lot of traffic that gets shipped down the rivers. So it was stalled. And so I have been leading the effort to make sure that those locks and dams are going to be recognized for their importance and that we get legislation going. And there was a water resources bill that we passed out of the House of Representatives a couple of years ago that finally put the Ohio River locks and dams on that list. And unfortunately, there's another study going on. So I'm running interference again at the Office of Management and Budget to try to get that put onto an accelerated path. I've also been very active, for example, looking for ways to make sure our seniors are getting the health care that they have earned. We have a program called Medicare Advantage. We have about 60% of seniors in Western Pennsylvania use Medicare Advantage. Nationally, it's only about 30%. One of the issues with the Affordable Care Act is it took away from seniors the right to switch plans. I thought that was wrong, so I did a bipartisan piece of legislation to restore to seniors the right to switch plans. And as we see healthcare evolve with doctor groups going to different hospital groups, I think it's important for seniors to have that choice to switch between plans, and so that is now law. That a number of the constituent services, that's always an important part of our work, making sure that people who call the office, if there's an issue with the Social Security Administration, the Veterans Administration, leading the effort there. I've been very active on the bipartisan task force fighting the heroin epidemic. I've gotten legislation passed, for example, on making sure that we're paying attention to the importance of naloxone or Narcan. This is a revival drug to get people to snap out of what is going to be death because of the overload on the nervous system, what the opioids are doing. So again, I teamed up with a Democratic congressman to make sure we got that into consideration in the Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act that we passed.
Okay. So, as a congressman that represents everyone in our district, what do you think is your strongest point on how you represent like the younger generations who, in this upcoming election, for most of our high schoolers, will be voting for the very first time?
Yeah. One of the things that very much concerns me, and I'm a dad, I have 6 kids. In fact, I have I have 4 that are out of high school. I still have 1 in high school and 1 to get to high school.
Yeah.
One's in 5th grade still. I started becoming very interested in running for office back in 2010 at a time when the national debt stood at $12 trillion. At that time, I was talking about your generation as being generation debt because of the irresponsible spending levels, and we just keep on racking up these deficits. At that time, we had a $1.4 trillion deficit, a $1.2 trillion deficit. We had these enormous deficits going back in the 80s. We came into surplus in the 1990s, and really since 2002, these deficits have just continued to pile up. We had a little period in 2007 where it started to get better again, but all this debt has to get repaid. And so we had a bill that came up a couple weeks ago, an omnibus bill, which I have been fighting this omnibus process since I came in. This is not the way to govern. They put these massive bills together. This one we had a couple weeks ago was 2,200 pages long. It spent $1.3 trillion, and they gave us 18 hours to read it.
And nobody could read it in that time.
I voted no on it. I thought it was irresponsible. I was suggesting that what we should do is take 2 weeks, do a temporary spending bill to keep the government open, but let members read this, let them go home to their constituents and explain what's in this bill. But no, the decision, this has been a bipartisan problem. You saw Nancy Pelosi say, hey, you're going to pass this bill to find out what's in it. No, that's not responsible. We have to make sure that we are looking at this legislation and understanding what we're doing. Right now, with a $21 trillion debt, the average per person in this country is $61,000. Do you feel like you owe $61,000, or do you feel like you owe $61,000?
I feel like that's a little overwhelming.
We're looking at a string now of trillion-dollar deficits that the Congressional Budget Office just talked about. Understand what a trillion-dollar deficit means. That means that every single minute of every single day, we're borrowing $2 million. Think about that.
Nonstop, just
nonstop. And so how do you address that? Well, one of the important things is to get back to a healthy economic growth rate, because we know that when we have a healthier growth rate, you're actually increasing revenues to the Treasury. That's going to help with that deficit. We saw that certainly in the 1990s. We saw in the 1980s, actually, when we cut taxes, but we didn't do a good job of controlling spending in the 1980s. We did in the 1990s, however. We had a big tax cut in 1995. We had a capital gains tax cut. We had a middle class tax cut. The revenues actually grew during the late 1990s, but we controlled spending. And we had this bill a couple weeks ago that frankly did not control spending. We had to put more resources into the military, but there was an insistence by Chuck Schumer and others that if you're going to increase military spending, you have to increase domestic spending. And so there was a 12% increase in domestic spending. This is not the year to do that, especially when you had disaster recovery programs that we had to fund with Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico. People complain about a lack of bipartisanship in Washington. Well, there was certainly a bipartisan vote supporting this budget-busting bill that we had, and that's not the kind of bipartisanship we need. We need bipartisan commitment to making sure we're not passing this massive debt along to your generation.
So we talk about the failure in Congress on both sides of the party.
We do.
There's recent news that House Majority Leader Paul Ryan will not be running for election. What do you think that means for kind of the future of your party in Congress and as a whole? Do you think it's going to shift, and what are your ideas and leadership?
Well, obviously when you have a Speaker of the House decide that he or she is not going to run again, that is big news, because the Speaker does occupy a very prominent position in the House of Representatives. And so I would look at the process going on right now in the Republican conference. Well, who's going to take Paul's place? The leading contender is Kevin McCarthy. He's our majority leader, is well liked across the conference. And so we'll see how that process develops over the coming weeks and months. At the same time, we are looking at issues that we want to talk about with the American people come the fall election. Do we want to promote more government and higher taxes, or more jobs and higher wages? I'm going to be promoting more jobs and higher wages, and how we get there. I think, again, we look at the landmark tax reform package that we did. It was the first time in 30 years that we did an overhaul of the tax code. Next year, people are going to have a much simpler time doing their taxes because of doubling the standard deduction, direct benefits to people who have kids, increasing the child tax credit, lowering the rates across the board. These are all very good things for families. And at the same time, on the business side, making sure we have a much more competitive tax code where we're seeing companies invest, so that when you get through college, or whether you go right into the workforce. That's another issue that your generation needs to be looking at. What do you do post-high school? And to take a look at the full range of options that people have. One thing I'd like to make a little pitch for I talk to high school students all the time about
Yeah.
the service academy option,
Okay.
whether it's West Point Naval Academy,
Okay,
Coast Guard
yeah.
Academy, Air Force Academy, Merchant Marine Academy. These are really remarkable institutions in our country, storied institutions. We only had 31 applications this year from across the district.
Wow.
Typically, we have twice that many. And I talked to my colleagues in Congress. They saw similar drop-offs. And we have service academy nights where we try to encourage kids to apply to the academies. We have representatives of the academies here. And I get to make the phone call saying, hey, and I just made a phone call yesterday to a young woman who's going to be, has a chance to go to West Point. She was given an offer to go to West Point.
That's awesome.
This is, they're looking for tomorrow's leaders today. And for us to help kids understand that's just but one option that you may have. But there's 4-year college options, there's 2-year college options, community college, vocational training, the trades, really tremendous opportunities with the trades, and people can make very good money coming out of those programs. I did a tour down at Duquesne Light and what they do for the lineman position, the training program they have. And people, the opportunities to make a 6-figure income not too long after completing that program.
And not going into massive debt.
Yeah.
Well, but that's it.
One of the things you were just saying was how we in this generation we're all plagued by debt, and we're both seniors. We're about to go into college. We're going to incur a lot of debt.
Yeah.
So
well, it's important for you to work with your financial aid officers at your school, and to really press them what kind of opportunities the schools might have, because there is tuition discounting going on at some of these colleges, and people should be aware of that. And really to have them compete for you. Say if you get accepted at 3 or 4 colleges, go to one college and say, hey, this college is doing this for me. What can you guys do? People want the best students, and they're gonna try to make it work for you. At the same time, we got to be very careful. There are work study programs that people can do. We continue to provide billions of dollars of student aid out of the federal government. I think you have to ask some hard questions of some of these colleges, why they continue to accelerate the tuition increases at faro paces, the inflation that we see in other things. It's interesting because both in healthcare and in education, you see this dramatic increase in cost every single year that you don't see in other parts of the economy. And you have to start asking some questions, why is that happening?
Yeah.
All right.
So if Trump was to be up for re-election tomorrow, would you support him?
If the opponent was Hillary Clinton, yes. I mean, and I made the argument prior to the last election. Why would somebody vote for Donald Trump? The basic reason was, and I laid this out in an op-ed that ran nationally on CNN. Donald Trump was going to sign our legislation that was going to move this economy forward. He was going to sign our tax cut bill. He was going to sign the regulatory reform initiatives that we were promoting. We have an issue with defense. We have an issue with America's role in the world. And from that perspective, I knew that Donald Trump would sign those policy initiatives. We had a whole platform called the Better Way Agenda that looked at any number of areas. Empowerment of people, getting people back in the game again, taking a look at some of our public assistance programs. How do we coax people to get back into the labor force? Is there a way that we can be retooling our programs? And having work requirements, having job training requirements for able-bodied adults who don't have kids, because we know every time we get somebody back to work, that helps us pay these critical programs. Every time you get somebody back to work, look, they're paying Social Security tax and Medicare tax. That helps the country, and it helps them. It helps them get on their own feet and have that dignity. And we have to appreciate that every type of work has dignity. And going back to the earlier question about what kids are looking at after college. So when you choose a president, you're looking at policies. People can talk about people's personalities, but I'm looking at the policies that they're going to be pursuing.
Yeah. Okay. So you've won a few elections now. This is your 3rd time, I believe.
I got elected. I ran first in 2010, lost that election, and came back, one in 2012, one in 2014, one in 2016, and now we got the new one coming up.
Yeah. So do they all feel as special as the first one, the first win that you got?
It's an amazing process that we have in our country.
Yeah.
The way we hire individuals to represent us in government. This is a representative republic.
Yeah.
You have to get out and have the marketplace of ideas and be able to defend your positions. And so every time that you're out there, it's exciting. Being elected is a humbling experience. I still remember the night I was first elected in 2012. You work hard, you work for a long time for these initiatives, and then to see it happen and see all that hard work come through. Yeah, I think that it's uniquely special the first time you get elected, but each time you get reelected, I think it is special.
Yeah. So I don't know if okay. So why should people vote for you and not for Lamb?
Again, I think you look at the issues that we've been dealing with, again, from a focus of empowering people, getting people back to work, making sure we have a healthy, growing, thriving, dynamic economy. We tried having the Democrats a majority under Speaker Pelosi. We saw them pass the Affordable Care Act. We saw that it really did not deliver on the promises. They promised that your premiums were going to go down $2,500. They promised that if you liked your health care plan, you could keep your health care plan. They promised you if you liked your doctor, you could keep your doctor. That has not taken place. We have seen tremendous disruption in the health insurance industry. I know I'm in the individual market myself. If you're in the individual market, that's a problem, because every year I get a 25% increase, and I'm in the individual market because I think that there was an unauthorized subsidy for members of Congress to get health care. And so I, along with other members of Congress, some of them, said, no, we're not going to take that. That's not right. Under the Affordable Care Act, members of Congress are supposed to be getting their health care through the ACA without any subsidy. Well, they gave members of Congress a subsidy because they forgot to put the subsidy in, and I thought that was wrong. And then you had these elites in Washington, D.C. There was a professor from MIT, Jonathan Gruber. He said that they were able to pass this bill, and he talked about the stupidity of the American people. That was a contempt for the American people. And so we have to be understanding that we have a responsibility. Look, we the same thing they did with healthcare, they did with the financial services industry with passing this thing called Dodd-Frank. Everybody was concerned after 2008 about the abuses on Wall Street. Well, they went overboard. And again, they crimped the flow of capital to consumers and to small businesses. And this is why this study I talked about before, 650,000 fewer small businesses. This same article talked about the two-speed economy. The big folks are fine. It's those small to medium-sized people that weren't fine. So as you look at this election going forward, do you want to have the more government, higher taxes model that we had under the last time the Democrats controlled the House? Or should we be pursuing a more jobs and higher wages? And that's what we're seeing. We are seeing this economy finally recover, finally grow at healthy growth rates. And so that's a big issue for us.
So this is kind of going more back on the lighter side. You mentioned that you had a background in Buffalo, and here in Pittsburgh, obviously, we're a very big hockey city. So personally, are you a Sabres fan or a Penguins fan?
I'm a huge Penguins fan.
Huge Penguins.
Good to hear.
Well, I've raised all my 6 kids here, and from a very early age, they were enthralled with the Penguins. My daughter is probably the biggest Penguins fan there is.
Oh, wow.
So we're very excited about what's happening right now, and hoping we can carry it through. I remember when I came here in 1990. So what happens when you marry a Pittsburgh girl? They pull you in. But it was right at the time of the first real ascendancy. So it's very good to be here.
That's
so
awesome.
Would you say you prefer living in D.C. or here in Pittsburgh?
I don't live in D.C. I live here in Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah, but whenever you spend time there.
I spend 10 nights a month in D.C. We're typically there for 3 weeks out of 4. We have 1 week being a district work period where we're back here working the districts. The weeks that we're in D.C., it's Monday through Thursday or Tuesday to Friday. I sleep on my couch in my office because I'm working 18 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
I fall asleep with a briefing book on my lap for the next day and get up, do it all again. And so home is here.
Good.
So one final question is, for a lot of high schoolers that are kind of looking into getting the political process or getting involved, what advice do you have for them?
Believe in yourself.
Okay.
Believe in yourself. Believe in the goodwill of people. We live in a very divided time. we live in a time where one side demonizes the other. You know, it's remarkable that people can't have an honest disagreement over a policy position anymore, it seems. And I think part of that is the social media context, the way people communicate. Look, 140 characters or now 280 characters in a tweet just doesn't convey the substance of an argument. Facebook postings, it just, the things that people say on social media, and then the 30-second sound bites, people are always trying to say something very provocative. Look, it's okay to have a policy difference without demonizing your opponent.
Yeah.
But you see the right demonize the left demonizes the right. People need to have deeper, more open, honest conversations without attributing some evil imperative to them. And so I think it's important as young people look at the political process and how can I make a difference? Be open, be frank, mean what you say, say what you mean, and trust that that's going to impact people. I love having conversations with folks across the district. It's very important that people connect with each other, be able to look in each other's eyes and appreciate that the person that you're talking with is, got their own hopes, aspirations, dreams. And this is a wonderful country where we're supposed to be able, if you look at our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the revolutionary nature of that document, where we recognize that the sovereignty of a government rests in the people, but that the people are endowed with certain inalienable rights. They're endowed by a creator with the rights to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. That you look at our Constitution, you look at our First Amendment, you look at the rights that are enshrined in that document. President Kennedy talked about our rights do not come from the generosity of the state, they come from the hand of God. That's what was revolutionary about this. People looked at their government as the one giving the rights. No. We have rights and our Constitution recognizes them. And so this is a theme that I have talked about for years. It permeates my policy thinking, and it's really a part of the fabric, going back to the founding of the Republic. It animated Abraham Lincoln, it animated Martin Luther King. And so, again, to go into the public sphere and be able to talk about those values is very important.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'd like to thank you once more for coming in today.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was a terrific experience.
No, great. Good luck.
This is awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
very
luck.
much.
Thank you, Congressman.